Well, my apologies to the quarterbacks in 2023. This is a quarterback tier show, but hey, DeAndre Hopkins happened yesterday. Joe Mixon restructured his contract. So quarterback tiers will be talked about, but they will have to wait just a little bit. Welcome in on Monday, July 17th. Adam Azer with Jamie Eisenberg and Heath Cummings. We'll update you on Draftathon and a chance to get in the podcast league. We'll update you on how to hear the Dynasty podcast, and we'll update you on the quarterback tiers. And good morning, guys. Jamie, welcome. No, welcome back. How was your week? I talked to you yesterday. I don't know. I'm going to go to Heath. Hey, Heath, what's up?
Hey, Adam. I hope you had a good weekend. What'd you do this weekend, Adam?
Furniture shopping. Oh. It was scary, It was this little sticker shock there. What did you think of the Hopkins news, Heath? What's going on in your fantasy football DeAndre Hopkins world?
It's been a journey because I originally thought, old receiver changing teams, run heavy Titans, and then I went and looked at what DeAndre Hopkins did last year on Arizona. He averaged more than 20 fantasy points per game in the 4 games he played with Kyler. He averaged like 16 fantasy points per game playing with Colt McCoy. 60% of his targets last year came from Colt McCoy or Trace McSorley, and he averaged 1.99 yards per route run. I've been arguing on Twitter about Calvin Ridley versus DeAndre Hopkins this morning. The reason I bring up the yards per route run, Calvin Ridley's career yards per route run is 1.93. He has one season over 1.77. I'm getting more and more excited about DeAndre Hopkins.
Hey. So where do you have him ranked? Because Jamie has him 21-ish, something like that, 22, somewhere around there. How about you?
19?
Oh, the high guy. Okay, but do you have him ranked ahead of Calvin Ridley?
2 spots ahead of Calvin Ridley.
But behind Christian Kirk, because you're still Kirk over Ridley.
Yes.
Okay. Who should be drafted first, guys? DeAndre Hopkins or Joe Mixon?
Mixon.
Yeah, I actually had not updated Mixon, so I'm going to do that right now. I think he goes up to the running back 10. Yeah, Mixon. Mixon round 2-3, Hopkins round 3-4.
Okay. Mixon. So, yeah, we did about a 17-minute show on Hopkins yesterday. But I didn't ask Jamie about your thoughts on Derrick Henry. So we can get into that. And, you guys can debate Hopkins or whatever you want to say about him. Go for it. Would love to get Heath's perspective. But, Jamie, your thoughts on Derrick Henry? Does this change anything for him?
Not at all. I think overall it helps, just from the standpoint of the team. But my concerns are still the same. If you go by offensive line rankings, Pro Football Focus has the Titans ranked last. If you go by his age, he's 29, and that's a screaming red flag for anybody at that position. And then you just look at wear and tear. In 2 of the last 3 seasons, he has 380 total touches or more. So I have the same concerns about him. I feel better about the situation that he's playing in because I think now you're not going to see as many 8-man fronts as you would have. You're still going to dare the Titans to beat you through the air as opposed to letting Derrick Henry run right through you. So you're still going to see a lot of loaded fronts, but for me, it's still somebody that I'm probably out on unless he falls to the right spot, which is the middle to the end of round 2, and he typically does not get there in most of the drafts that I'm in.
But he does in ADP, at least, in NFC ADP. That's Derrick Henry is, I mean, I've said it over and over again. Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs are at the 2-3 turn. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's a little confusing.
I think the fantasy implications and like the real life implications, if you tell me that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins are playing 17 games this year, I think they're all 3 going to smash their ADP. And I think the Titans are probably going to win the South. But there's a lot of risk with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins in terms of not missing time.
I don't think they're going to win the South, but I did see your tweet about that. You've been very active on Twitter with not hot takes, but I think you're stirring the pot a little bit. You're stirring the pot,
maybe so,
because people are still super high on Jacksonville, and you're just like. But you're right. I mean, Tennessee went into Jacksonville at Week 18 last year and nearly beat them with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. So to win which would have won them the division. So let's not discount Tennessee. They're obviously a lot better now. So Heath, your overall take on, let's say, on Tannehill, on Burks, and you already talked about Hopkins and I guess a little bit of Henry.
I think last week Jamie and I were on, and you asked where does Treylon Burks go if back when the odds spiked in Hopkins' favor, and I said round 10, and I think that was a little too low. I've got him in round 8, right around wide receiver 40. I think that same injury risk for DeAndre Hopkins or age risk for DeAndre Hopkins also provides some upside for Treylon Burks. But I don't think he's likely to be a starting wide receiver if Hopkins plays 17 games.
What about Chigo Okonkwo? Done?
He's still a number 2 tight end, isn't everyone?
Would you rather have Russell Wilson or Ryan Tannehill?
Wilson.
Jamie?
Wilson. Yeah, as we said yesterday, you brought up the fact of the tiers, which I guess we'll get to, of where these guys kind of fall in line. And I think Tannehill is in the group behind Wilson. But to Heath's point, though, if you were to guarantee 17 games from Ryan Tannehill, it would not be surprising if he's better, because I think, as we've seen in a couple of times over the last 5 years, Tannehill's been right there with Russell Wilson from a fantasy production standpoint. So if they both hit, Russell Wilson should be better, but I think Tannehill won't be far behind.
Let's talk a little bit more about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon restructures his contract to stay with the Bengals. 1 week from today, he will turn 27 years old. I'll probably forget next Monday. So, Joe, happy birthday in advance. He's been a top 10 running back per game in 4 of the last 5 seasons. In 2 straight seasons, he's been top 8 per game in half PPR, top 6 per game in full PPR. Yes, he scored a lot of points in one game against Carolina. If you want to remove that game, let's remove his best game last year. Let's remove his worst game last year. Let's remove the game he left early with an injury. I still think I think he would have been RB10 in every other week. His normal weeks, RB10 per game. And a lot of that was just the amount of catches the amount of passes he caught, the amount of catches he had. So how about the Pollard, Jacobs, Henry group? Is Mixon behind them?
Yes.
I have it Jacobs, Pollard, Mixon, Henry.
Okay. Why Mixon over Henry for you?
I think Henry's 2 years older. Like Mixon is at the spot, especially for Dynasty, where you start thinking, man, he could fall off a cliff at any moment. But I also think in your research, Adam, like age 27 has been a pretty fantastic year for running backs.
Yeah, unbelievable year.
Age 29 has not.
So it's wrong about that, but maybe it's not unbelievable. I might have oversold it, but it's a good year. It's a good year.
Very good year. It's 28, 29 where the cliff usually happens. I think there's more age risk, more overuse risk for Henry than there is for Mixon. That's the only reason why. Okay,
and Jamie, I know you like Ramondre Stevenson. Everybody likes Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson or Mixon?
Stevenson still for me, but Mixon is not far behind. I think those guys are in a very similar spot. The thing that concerns me about Mixon is what's changed from his situation a year ago.
Well, it's gotten better.
Samaje Perine left.
Perine left. Mixon
but
even the third down back last year.
The offensive line's probably better for run blocking, aren't they?
I would hope that they don't use anybody else in that regard. But I just don't see a big change.
Right, but he was like number 6 per game last year or something like that.
But again, you're still looking at that big game as part of that.
Yeah. I mean, look, everybody knows it. The guy has been shockingly inefficient as a running back. The regular metrics, the advanced metrics, they're just not good. I mean, they're just not good. And it's been almost
he's a volume guy.
Yeah. So Heath, you're not, it doesn't seem like you're buying what I'm saying.
I don't know if shockingly inefficient I would buy. Below average, I would agree with.
The reason I said that is because of the situation he was in, the light boxes that he faced. You would have expected him to.
But their offensive line for most of the time that Joe Mixon has been a Bengal has been awful.
Yeah.
And his career yards per carry is 4.1. Like he has 2 seasons in the last 5 below 4 yards per carry. I don't think that's it's fine. He's a little below average.
He has 1 year in his career above 4.1, right?
Yes.
That's not good. For a guy who is in such an advantageous situation. And then look at Samaje Perine.
I don't think it's a great situation.
Oh, it's such a good situation. Samaje Perine.
How's it not a great situation?
Mixon was out.
Their offensive line's been awful.
But it's not now.
Right. I think it's a good situation now.
I don't know if it was awful.
I don't think it was awful last year.
it was like 21st in run blocking grade for,
Okay. That's just as shockingly bad as 4.1 yards per carry.
I think you're over. I think you're not.
What do you think is average for yards per carry for a running back?
I mean, that's an interesting question because how many running backs are we talking about here? When you're talking about, a top 12 fantasy running back, 4.1 is bad.
Guys who get 15 carries a game.
I honestly don't know. I would guess in the 4.3, 4.4 range.
I'll try to get that for you.
I would just think that people are very disappointed at Joe Mixon's career, basically, and he should be doing more. Well, look, Heath, if people believed in him, he'd be a first-round pick or an early second-round pick as the primary guy for the Bengals who caught, how many catches did he have last year? He had 60 catches in 14 games. He's the undisputed goal line guy. Why is he going to be picked probably in the third round?
Because his ADP started in the 6th round because we thought he was going to get cut.
Do it all over again, and he is not going to be picked based on his fantasy production. He's going to.
If you're telling me right now that Pollard, Jacobs, and Henry are going at the 2-3 turn, there's no way Joe Mixon's getting into round 2.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think. Yeah, I think that Pollard, Jacob, and Mixon's going at the 2-3 turn is more a product of best ball ADP influencing regular ADP. I do not think those guys will be at the 2-3 turn when we get to August, and it's mostly redraft drafts.
I still don't think Mixon gets into round 2 though.
Yeah, he may not, but I was saying it's, in my opinion, it's because of where he started at the beginning of the summer. I think he'll get to round 3.
Well, anyway, he'll get to round 3, but based on how productive he's been each of the last 2 years, he should clearly be a second round pick, if not a late first round pick. But people aren't going to, I don't know. I think there's hesitation there.
Yeah, I think a big change is like Jamie and I are talking about him as a borderline top 12 running back, right? Maybe a high end number 2 running back. And that guy, that rank of running back is not getting into the second round anymore. It used to be if you were the number 10 running back, you might be a first round pick.
He was the number 6 running back per game in PPR 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. And he's 27 years old. He's on one of everybody's favorite offenses. He is the undisputed lead back for that team. He caught 60 passes last year. There's a reason why Joe Mixon is not a first-round pick. Everything I just said, he should be a first-round pick. At worst, a late first. At worst,
well, I mean, go back to P. Ryan Leaving. You think he's getting more than 60 catches?
I don't, but because most of his catches came on first and second down, I don't think they're going to throw to their running backs as much this year.
I have him at 63, but that's over 17 games as opposed to the 14 he played last year, so it's fewer per game.
The biggest thing when you just look at it is his lack of touchdowns. Like if he scores 3-4 more touchdowns, you can feel a lot better about him. And again, I know 4 of them came in one game, but
yeah,
it's just a lot of empty box scores for him.
Right. All right. So I'm sorry. My overall point is, if I told you, you got a 27-year-old running back who has been number 6 per game 2 years in a row, is on the Bengals, has no competition in his backfield, you would not think that guy is going in the 3rd round, which I think is where his ADP is going to be for a while. I think it might end up going higher, but
he should end up as one of the best picks in the 3rd round. Though. I mean, this was a guy that we were talking about. What was ADP last year? Like end of the 1st round, beginning 2nd round?
I'm not sure. Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Top 15?
Yeah.
And I just think, where do you think he'll settle in terms of running backs? He's RB 12?
To be drafted?
Yeah, the 12th running back?
I would say that's fair. Somewhere between 10 and 15 would be what I would guess.
And most of the last 10 years, if you're RB 12, you are a surefire 2nd round pick. It's been almost every year, at least 12 running. A lot of years, 18 running backs have been taken in the first 2 rounds. 16 running backs.
Based on what we're seeing, that Jefferson is probably going to be the 1st pick. Chase is probably going to end up being the 2nd pick. You're going to see a lot of people at the 2-3 turn looking at Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess you could just ask yourself, I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but why is a guy who's been number 6 2 years in a row going to be treated like number 12? And how long can we use how long can we use the contract situation as an excuse? Because that's gone now. So
I don't think you have to think about it that way, but I think also, there are a lot of people that clearly feel the way you do, that he's been inefficient, that he's been disappointing for where his overall numbers have put him. That if you look at his, games from a year ago, there's one game that spikes and the rest of them are sort of okay. But I think, if you're starting to compare him to, and you have to use the word upside, where does his upside lie by comparison to Derrick Henry, to Tony Pollard, to Josh Jacobs, to Jonathan Taylor, to Saquon Barkley? I don't think he's going to crack the top 3, but I think once you start to get through 4 through 12, there's certainly he's in that conversation. To me, he feels closer to, and take this for what it's worth, but in terms of volume, he feels closer to Najee Harris to me than he does to those other guys. Just the guy's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's got less competition than Najee does at this point, but similar type of scenario. He's going to get the ball a lot. Hopefully he's going to get 50 plus catches, and if he gets the total numbers, will be good at the end of the season. Just the week to week stuff will kind of feel a little disappointing.
Well, if their offensive line improves, I think you can make some very, very obvious Josh Jacobs comparisons, because Jacobs went from a 4-yard per carry guy to a 4.9 yard per carry guy, got every touch for that team, everyone that mattered basically. And if their offensive line gets better, which it should, maybe Mixon can be that guy. Maybe he could be a shocking, RB2 or something like that. Is that so far-fetched? I think
no. If he scored, if all the opportunities that he gets, if he scores more touchdowns, he'll be fine. Because if you're talking about a 60 catch guy that's going to get 250 carries, that's hard to overlook.
Right. Yeah. Jacobs had 340 carries. I don't know if Mixon gets there, but they didn't run a lot. They had the fifth lowest run rate last year. But all right. Point ended there with Joe Mixon. Now let's move on here real quick. Jacksonville signs Evan Ingram to a 3-year deal with $24 million guaranteed, according to Adam Schefter. Heath, quick analysis on that contract, what it means for Ingram.
It'll be a little boost for his dynasty value when I update those next week, because it's a little bit more security. He should be on that offense for at least the next 2 years now, instead of only being guaranteed this year. Don't think it means anything for redraft.
Okay. Tyreek Hill is guaranteeing 2,000 yards and a Super Bowl. What's more likely?
2,000 yards.
The Super Bowl.
We'll find out about Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and Saquon Barkley today. 4 p.m. Eastern time is the deadline to get a long-term deal done before it's franchise tag or else. And those are the last 3 guys, Jacobs, Pollard, and Barkley, still on the franchise tag. Found someone who likes Andy Dalton more than Heath. Miles Sanders called Andy Dalton a future Hall of Famer. I like Miles Sanders, but I'm going to have to disagree with him on that one.
He doesn't watch a lot of football, apparently.
What's that?
He doesn't watch a lot of football, apparently.
Him up. No, he doesn't. Tim Twentyman of DetroitLions.com said Jahmyr Gibbs, quote, might be the best receiving running back I've seen in a Lions uniform in my 15 years covering the team.
I wonder who his top 3 are.
Swift, Gibbs, Swift, Abdullah.
Amir Abdullah. There's some great names.
Reggie Bush? Mike Casey? Was he on the Lions?
He was, but it was the last 15 years.
Oh yeah.
Best maybe.
yeah. I think so. Look that up.
I think so. Is he? Yes, he was on the Lions later in his career. It was 10 years ago.
New England wide receiver Tyquan Thornton was dealing with a soft tissue injury in the spring, so we'll hope he's ready for training camp. And encouraging news for the Jets. Tackle Mekhi Becton, probably going to be their right tackle this year. He recently weighed in the 340 range, in the low 340s, according to Pro Football Talk, and that's a big deal. Very talented player who's had major issues with his weight, so hope that would be great for the Jets if they can get a good season out of Mekhi Becton. All right, couple things to promote here. The Podcast League. You want in? We've got 3 days left for you to go and bid on a spot in our Podcast League. It's about $2,000 now, and we want to raise as much money as we can. Right now, it's $1,925. It's all going to St. Jude. Go to tinyurl.com/FFT donate. I've been tweeting about it as well. tinyurl.com/FFT donate. At that site, you can see the spot in the Podcast League. And I put the date of the draft. I think we are going Monday, August 28th, I believe it is, at 8 p.m., but that's in the information. You can bid on that there and many other things to benefit St. Jude and benefit your fantasy team. tinyurl.com/FFT donate. We are also adding a new feed to the Fantasy Football Today family. Starting tomorrow, you'll be able to hear the FFT Dynasty Show in its own feed. That is awesome. It has, I would say, the coolest logo in Apple Podcast or any podcast platform. Check it out. Fantasy Football Today. It's great. But yeah, it's a brand new feed. We got the link in the episode description, or you can find it by searching Fantasy Football Today Dynasty on your favorite podcast platform. And hosted by Heath Cummings. And by the way, if you're a viewer, still on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. We're going to take a break and get to quarterbacks. They deserve it. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Time now for our quarterback tiers. So, yeah, Heath, do you have your projection tiers available?
I have my projections available, so I can easily see where the tier breaks would be. So we can do that type of comparison if you'd like. Where I assume we're going over Dave's tiers.
No, I was thinking. I don't want to do Dave's tiers without Dave here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I figured,
it's just rankings. I mean, all we're doing is just separating them.
Right. But obviously the tiers. Look, Jamie, what's the point of doing tiers for those who don't use tiers?
The purpose of doing tiers is that you're going to look to get a player in a certain group that you feel is going to hopefully stand out, or if you're going the opposite direction of that, you're looking to get the last player in a tier that you feel the most confident in. So, for example, the tier 1 quarterbacks, I think for most people are going to be the top 3 guys in some order of Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. And if you want one of those 3 guys, you just want to make sure you get at least the last one based on how it falls. So it's just a matter of separating them into who you think is going to stand out. It's how we probably separate breakouts and sleepers as well. If you're in a certain tier, you're going to have a chance to be a top X number player or not reach that necessarily that caliber of level. So I think it's just separating the rankings into certain groups.
And let's say hypothetically you had a big second tier, which was Burrow, Fields, Jackson, Herbert, Lawrence. Let's just say that you had a 5-person tier. Burrow was the first one in your tier and Lawrence was the last one. If they're in the same tier, does that mean that you really should never draft Joe Burrow and you should just always wait for Trevor Lawrence? Or is that taking it a little bit too literally?
That's taking it too literally.
Yeah. And it depends, like some of these tiers are a little closer than others too. Like it depends on how you often, I think, say that I make the tiers too small. And so I'm going to try to have some bigger tiers for you, some crocodile tiers for you today. But yeah, that is taking it a little too far, but that's kind of the purpose. Like if you have 3 guys in the same tier and one of them goes in round 10 and one of them goes in round 6, you should probably draft the one that goes in round 10 in round 9.
Is there anything other than an injury that you think could change your quarterback tiers before the season starts?
Yes.
Sure.
Just preseason scuttlebutt.
I think Anthony Richardson's probably a good one to look at because if he looks great, he can jump a tier, or be pushed into a higher tier, and vice versa. Could certainly fall down a tier or 2 if he struggles.
Okay.
Think about what Ryan Tannehill just did, right? He went from somebody that was borderline undraftable to now someone who you should consider as a starter in a 2 quarterback league.
Okay. So let's go to tier 1 then. And we'll try to work in, there's going to be 6-point per passing touchdown tiers, but we'll definitely work in some 4-point stuff as well. I'll put it in the notes. All right, Heath, what's our first tier?
Yeah, tier 1 is, I think everyone will agree, Mahomes, Allen, and Jalen Hurts in whatever order you want. I would say in a 4-point per pass touchdown league, I would not put Mahomes in the first tier. It would just be Allen and Hurts.
Too small. This tier should be at least 10 people.
Yeah, well, you were just talking about tier 2 with Justin Fields and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, so I assumed that we had some agreement on this. I apologize.
No. Okay, so Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, it's Allen, Hurts, and is Mahomes in his own tier?
No, I think in a 4-point per pass touchdown league, he just falls down into the next tier.
Oh, interesting.
Because part of his big edge is the fact that he projected for quite a few more touchdowns than anybody else. Passing touchdowns. And so if you take away 2 points for every one of those, it is a pretty big deal.
Jamie, how do you see it in a 4-point per passing touchdown league? I think everyone in the world sees Mahomes, Allen, Hurts in a 6-point per passing touchdown league as tier 1. What about in a 4-point?
I would still put Mahomes in tier 1 with 4 points for passing touchdowns. So I would still, same 3 guys.
Would he be last though, Mahomes?
He would be behind Allen Hurts, yes.
Okay. All right. What's tier 2? Interesting question here.
I think this is where the controversy starts. In tier 2, I would only have Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Fields. I don't have Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence in that tier. I actually think Herbert probably belongs in a tier of his own because you could make a better argument for him than anyone else to join tier 2 with these 3 guys. It was just so miserable last year that it's hard to do that.
I would put those 4 guys together: Jackson, Fields, Burrow, and Herbert.
Okay, Jackson Fields, Burrow. At least there's consensus there between the two of you,
right?
And Herbert for Jamie. Heath has.
And I think, to be honest, a lot of people would probably put Burrow in the first tier.
Let's explore that. Does Burrow have that same upside where he could approach 30 fantasy points per game in a 6-point per passing touchdown league like we've seen from Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts?
I would say that more people than not would probably say that he has the best chance to get there from a passing standpoint.
I think he has. I would definitely agree with that last caveat that Jamie added. He has the best chance to get there from a passing standpoint. I think because of the way that rushing counts, I think it's more likely that Fields or Lamar finishes as QB1 than Burrow.
Let me just see. So he averaged in 9 games with Chase and Higgins both healthy, not leaving early. The best sample size of Joe Burrow. He averaged 28.5 points per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. 23.5 and 4-point. You probably can't make the case of Burrow being in tier 1 and 4-point, right?
No, not if you're especially knocking Mahomes down.
In 6-point, his pace was 4,945 yards, 42 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, plus 223 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. He did have, by the way, 3 1-yard rushing touchdowns last year, 5 overall. I don't know if he'll be able to repeat that, but that is a compelling case right there. 28.5 points per game in the 9 games with a fully healthy Jamar Chase, T. Higgins not leaving early with injury. Does that do it for you?
Again, I would put him, like, for me, he's behind Fields and Jackson and Fields because of the rushing. So he's in tier 2. But I think if you look at the way most people draft, most analysts draft, and probably the way ADP is going to shake out, he is probably closer to the top 3 than he is to those 2.
Yeah, but I could not take him in the 2nd round. I'm sure you guys couldn't either. Joe Burrow.
No, but I think what we're going to see is because quarterbacks are going to get pushed up, that a lot of people are going to consider it. So it comes down to, we know what the flaws are for Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields. Jackson hasn't finished the last 2 seasons. Fields has yet to prove himself over a full season. Certainly has a room to grow as a passer. Joe Burrow has established himself. Like he is that next guy. But fantasy wise, he still has some room where he can get better. And it would take him having that 5,000-yard season, that 45 touchdown season, limiting the interceptions, running a little bit more. Could he do it? Absolutely. I would not put it past him. Like I think if you're looking at it for me, if I'm drafting just based on tiers, if you tell me I get Burrow or Herbert based on how I have it ranked, I love it. But again, I think most people are going to take Burrow ahead of Jackson and Fields.
Right. You're saying that you'd rather take Herbert at his value than Burrow.
I would rather take Herbert at his value than any of these guys because I'm still, as much as I would love to get one of these quarterbacks, I would still love to wait as well because I think the upside for Herbert is still there. I don't think what happened last year does not sway me from where I think Herbert's going to finish.
Okay. What ADP would you like me to use today, guys? Should I keep using NFC?
Yes, but you could filter out best ball.
Okay, I'll do it since July 1st. And okay. I'll do all drafts non-superflex. How about that? So Mahomes is 12th. Josh Allen is 18th. Jalen Hurts is also 18th. Joe Burrow is 28th. Then Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert are 38th. And Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are about 50th. So these tiers are very different. This would have Burrow in his own tier, basically. Then Jackson and Herbert in their own tier. Then Fields and Lawrence in their own tier.
And I think that's like when you start looking at it and tiering by ADP, you're getting back into more what Dave does with his tiers. And so there's going to be some pretty big gaps probably because usually when we're both on a tier show, there's some pretty big gaps between what we're doing.
All right, so to recap, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts in tier 1, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields in tier 2 for Heath. Jamie's going to throw Justin Herbert in there as well. And let's go to the next tier 3.
Yeah, and this is where I kind of feel like Herbert deserves his own tier, but for the purposes of having the discussion, we should just probably put him clearly at the top of tier 3. And then I think this includes Tua, this includes Anthony Richardson, this includes Dak, this includes Deshaun Watson, this includes Trevor Lawrence. And I would probably cut it off at that point. And I don't care about the order. We're talking about tiers. So Lawrence, Watson, Dak, Richardson, Tua, Herbert. I put Herbert above those guys in a different tier because he's had a couple of 26 fantasy point per game seasons already. And I'm willing to give him a little more of a pass on last year. But I think any of these guys could reasonably jump into tier 2 this year.
Okay. Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, Anthony Richardson, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence. And Heath is not really so concerned about the order. This is just the group of 6 that are in this tier, with Justin Herbert really in like tier 2.5. Jamie, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, disagree. Again, I would put Herbert in the tier above, but I think these are the guys that either, in the case of Lawrence, Richardson, and Tua, these are the breakout candidates, and so those are the guys I think that have the chance to certainly not necessarily jump a tier, but by the end of the season, you'd be pretty thrilled if they play a full season and play to their capabilities and obviously play to their ceilings. If you want to throw Watson and Dak in there as well, I think those guys are going to be very, very polarizing for a lot of people because of what Deshaun looked like last year. And then obviously Dak and just, people just feeling like they're sort of out on him. But sure, if you want to put these guys all in one group, I don't have a problem with that.
All right, Dak Prescott, not really a great season, especially from a touchdown standpoint. And he was still QB9 per game. So Prescott and Watson are 2 players that we've actually seen with top 5 finish. Oh, and Herbert, sorry. So Herbert, Watson, and Dak have done it before.
Right.
Tua, Richardson, and Lawrence have not. Does that matter at all when you look at this group?
I mean, I think it matters more because I would probably agree that Tua, Richardson, and Lawrence have more upside than Dak and Watson this year. But those guys have not shown for more than 4 or 5 games any reason to think that they will make the leap into tier 2, whereas Prescott and Watson have actually done it.
With all 6 of these players, Herbert, Watson, Tua, Richardson, Prescott, Lawrence, do you feel fine with them as your only quarterback?
Lawrence, without hesitation. Watson and Dak, yes. Richardson and Tua, no.
Agreed.
And obviously Herbert, yes. So Herbert, I think when you look at I looked at the last 5 years and some of the biggest surprises at quarterback, and there were a couple of things that really stood out. Well, 3 things. Okay, 1, you've got the young breakout player. That happens. 2, and when I say surprises, I mean guys who really outperformed their ADPs and had great seasons. Players with new offensive coordinators is, Dak Prescott, Ben Roethlisberger in 2018. They got rid of Todd Haley and went to Randy Fichtner or whatever. Randy Fichtner.
And he was Ben Roethlisberger.
What did I say? Oh yeah. But he threw the ball 114 more times than he did the year before. Dak Prescott. When Dak Prescott went from being this fine 23 touchdown pass guy to a guy who threw for like 4,900 yards and 30 touchdowns in 2019.
And by the way, the guy that did that is now going to be with Justin Herbert.
Absolutely. And also veteran bounce back. We tend to discount older guys, but some of the guys who have been the best ADP overperformers in the last 5 years have been Aaron Rodgers, have been Tom Brady, Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan went from an MVP season in 2016 to a pretty bad season in 2017 to being QB2 in 2018. He was an amazing value, and he was QB 13 in ADP. So Justin Herbert, I would say, checks 2 of those 3 boxes. He's got the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, and he's kind of like not nearly in the same part of his career as a Matt Ryan or an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, but he was QB2.
But he doesn't fit the thing we're talking about. Guys who surprise and outperform ADP.
If he's really QB6 or 7, then you're right. He's not like QB9 or 10. I wish he were going lower, but he could still finish as a top 2 QB. He's done it before. Maybe he was 3. He could still dramatically outperform his ADP. I think anyway.
I couldn't agree more. I think he's my favorite value at the position.
Okay. Let's go to tier 4 then, Heath. What do we got in tier 4?
Tier 4 is kind of the boring guys: Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith. I don't know where I'm supposed to put Kyler Murray in this group. He probably is another guy like Herbert who kind of deserves his own tier, because if he's 100% for week 1, then he should definitely be in the earlier tier. If he's going to start on the pup, then he doesn't belong in this tier.
So Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith. Is that what it was?
Do you see what happened with Will Brinson and Kyler Murray?
I sure did.
No, but I can't wait to hear.
Will did quarterback tiers for the site from a reality standpoint, and he broke them down into like certain categories, and he gave, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but he put Kyler in like the last tier. I don't know what to do tier.
Right. His tiers were so different than, it wasn't even based on performance. It was just interesting categories. So where was Kyler Murray? He was in the no clue, man. Like, just didn't know what to make of them this year. He doesn't know if Kyler Murray is going to play. So
when you see it, you're obviously just looking at the tiers. When you read it and hear him talk about it, it's a little different. He explains it. If Kyler is right, he's in 5 tiers up. So Kyler just saw the tiers listing and he made a comment about it, and then it blew up everywhere. So.
Yes, I saw it in the New York Post and I sent it to Brinson. I was like, "You made the New York Post?" And like he has his quarterback tiers have, like, Daniel Jones is higher than Dak Prescott because the tiers are just different. Daniel Jones is in the intrigue with question marks, with Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson. And then Dak Prescott is in the you can win with them category, which is actually lower than the intrigue with question marks one. So it was a fun article. If you just retweet the image, the graphic that was made on social media, and don't have any of the context, you will lose your mind.
So I'm looking at Kyler's tweet, and that's what he's tweeting off of, just the list.
Yeah.
Where he is in tier 6.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, tier 6 of 7. Right above the rookies, and he just, with 3 crying laughing emojis, said, "I love it."
Right.
So I'm going to move Kyler Murray up now. No, but I think like Jamie's early comment at the top of the show that tiers are just kind of rankings, but broken into groups, does not appear to be true for Will's tiers. Those are not rankings. They're broken into groups at all.
No. It's almost like, what stage of your career are you in? Those are Will's tiers. But for this tier, Jones, Cousins, Rodgers, Geno Smith. So I just asked you if you felt good with just Herbert, Watson, Tua, Richardson, Prescott, Lawrence as your only quarterback. And for some of them, you said yes. Does that apply to any of these guys? Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith.
I think
as your only quarterback, I think these are the guys that you want to pair with the questionable guys in front of them. That's what I would love to do. I draft Richardson, I'm looking for Geno Smith. I draft Tua, I'm looking for Aaron Rodgers. I'm looking for those safe, reliable guys that have shown, obviously, for their entire career, mostly Aaron Rodgers, or at least, the ability last year. And I think you make a case that, Russell Wilson and Jared Goff probably belong in this group as well. But, the guys that have the chance to still be safe starters, and again, we saw it last year that can they hit the 20-point threshold consistently? Geno Smith did that. I think Aaron Rodgers, you should feel comfortable with him hopefully doing that. Kirk Cousins, they're going to throw the ball so much. There's a lot to like there. And then Daniel Jones with his legs. So this group is the perfect wait for quarterback group. So if you're still in that camp that you want to wait and be the last person to draft your starter, this is the group you're living in.
So Kyler Murray, we're just going to leave out of this group for now. It's Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, and Geno Smith. Who has the most upside?
Cousins.
I'm going to say Cousins too, because I do think it's unlikely because of how much they threw last year, but I do think it's possible they just throw even more. And He has Addison, who's better than Thielen.
Why is it not Aaron Rodgers? We've already played this game with Rodgers before, and he, won 2 straight MVPs.
I don't think they're going to throw as much, and I think it comes down to, at his age, does he still have that level to get to again? I think you got to be excited about Garrett Wilson just based on he went from a 2-time MVP, lost Devontae Adams, and struggled, and now he has a guy that not necessarily at that level, but that caliber of player. He's reunited with Nathaniel Hackett. Whatever you think of him, his best years have come with Nathaniel Hackett. And you hope motivation. You hope that he's going to a situation where, okay, maybe he was a little disgruntled last year and just kind of went through the motions, and now he's, back to being that MVP caliber quarterback. So he was the other guy that came to mind when you asked the question. But I think Cousins has, just a little bit higher ceiling based on what's happening for him and the team that he plays for.
Yeah, the other guy that I hesitated not saying, and I really don't know what to do with is Geno.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
I think he was the best of this group last year, and then he added Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, it's hard for me to believe, and I don't ever bet on guys like that, and that's why he's in this tier. But it feels like he's being shorted a little bit here.
Okay, so it's not Daniel Jones. All right, we will take a break. I just want one thing about real quick on Cousins. What'd you make of his, very low by his standards, 4.5% touchdown rate? Because if he can get his touchdown rate back up and still throw, he threw the 4th most passes in football last year. Is that some hidden upside there for Cousins?
Yeah. I mean, again, you look at, we always talk about who do these guys have, and he's got best receiver in the game, top whatever tight end you want to, put Hawkinson at.
I already disagree with you. He does not have the best receiver in the game.
What, Isaiah Hodgins?
Joe Burrow is the best receiver in the game.
Okay, you can make the argument. So, arguably the best receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson, and top X tight end, but top 5 by most people's estimation, and added a high upside rookie. So there's everything to love. Plus his running game just maybe disappeared.
I got a great stat, Heath.
Okay.
Great stat for you. The Vikings, this is actually, I found this in my Mixon stats. The Vikings were one of the teams in the bottom 5 in run rate last year. So one of the most pass-heavy teams. The other 5 teams were the Bengals. No, got this stat wrong.
It's a great stat.
Yeah,
I think it was the bottom 5 in run rate. And the Vikings were the only team that were bottom 5 in run rate and were not top 5 in running back targets. So most teams that don't run the ball ever throw a ton to their running backs, and the Vikings were 22nd in running back targets.
and that's the path to Justin Jefferson being the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football, TJ Hawkinson being a top 5 tight end, and Jordan Addison still being startable.
Right. There you go. I would expect more. I would just expect more because most teams that throw that much.
More running back targets?
Yeah. They were really
who?
low. Like to Madison, honestly. I'm just saying they were really low. I think they got to get closer to league average.
I will just say that, like, the Rams the last 2 or 3 or 4 years have been amongst the lowest in running back target share. And that's where the Vikings coach and system came from.
All right, maybe. All right, here we go. We'll take a break here. We come back. We got the rest of our tiers. We get into some backup quarterbacks, some high upside guys late, and we'll be right back. All right, we are up to tier 5, and we have gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 quarterbacks in, plus Kyler Murray. Kyler, where do you want to put Kyler Murray, Heath?
I think that we should just talk about Kyler by himself, probably, because I don't think you can put him in a tier. I think like he probably belongs in that Watson group of could be really good if everything's okay. I don't think that the Cardinals are going to be so bad with Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore and one of their tight ends that if he's healthy, he's going to be bad for fantasy this year. So it's just a health thing with him for me. I think he's probably a top 10 quarterback if he's 100%, and he might not play the first 6 weeks of the season.
So where would you rank him if he's ready for camp?
If he's ready for camp, I would rank him probably right behind Richardson, who I think I have 10th.
Okay, so he'd be lower for me. He'd be probably 12th at best.
He'd be 10th. I'd have Richardson 9th and Kyler 10th.
Okay. How about tier 5 then? Who should we talk about in this tier?
Man, we are definitely, for me, I think it's just Wilson and Goff. It's the two guys that Jamie said. I just have them about 20 points behind the other guys. Wilson because of how bad he was last year. Goff because of how bad he was before last year.
All right, so Wilson is the one who checks 2 of the boxes and is a steal in ADP if he hits.
Yes.
Right? Wilson's got the new offensive coordinator, and he's the veteran bounce back guy. So
exactly.
So that would be the one.
And better offensive line. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. Wilson and Goff, no issues here.
No, I don't think so. I think you can make a case if Stafford, again, to play the Tannehill game. If you tell me Stafford's playing 17 games, I would put him in this category also. I know his receiving core's got some issues aside from Cooper Kupp, but I think it's just buying into what he's done and what Sean McVay has done. So I would put him just behind that. So if you want to put those guys in a tier by themselves, it's fine.
Tier 6.
It's almost everybody else, I think, at this point, because it's mostly a hope and a prayer. They're probably low-end QB2 starters is what our expectation is, and maybe they have some hope of improving and being a mid-range QB2 starter. I think you put Purdy in here, you put Howell in here, you put Tannehill and Stafford, you put Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, Jordan Love. Everybody else would probably put Derek Carr in there as well.
Jamie, do you see any definitive tiers amongst everyone else after?
I'm saying, I said almost everybody else. I wouldn't put Ritter or whoever starts for Tampa Bay in this tier.
Okay. How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I'd probably leave Garoppolo out too, just with the concerns. But yeah, no, I think Heath has it right. It's a lot of ifs.
And I'd probably leave Mac Jones out as well. I don't think he's very likely.
Okay. Who do you think, if you were going to, 2 QB league, I mean, who do you target here for some of your favorites?
Based on cost, it's Howell, because he's going around QB 30, and he has we've talked about it so many times. I hate to keep saying the same thing over and over, but he ran for 800 yards and 12 touchdowns his last year at college, and he had 35 rushing yards his only start in the NFL. He's got Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and he's got the upside. I know there's question marks about Eric Bieniemy, but he has the upside of, if Eric Bieniemy's good, and he has those 2 wide receivers, and he rushes for 30 yards a game, he's probably there.
I just wonder with him, he's, to me, feels benchable, reality-wise. If he struggles, Jacoby Brissett starting. That's the concern.
Something you definitely have to take that into account in a super flex league or a 2 QB league. Less job security than, say, someone like Jordan Love, you'd think. And people seem to like, I don't know the vibe you're getting, Jamie. I'm getting a lot of love for Jordan Love just from the general public. I'm sure there's a lot of, anti-Jordan Love too, but for quarterbacks going in this range, I think there's maybe more excitement about Love. Just my personal take on it. More excitement from the fantasy community about Jordan Love, than other quarterbacks in this range.
I think look, you can't sit here and say, again, we play the weapons game. Who do they have? So we're hyping up Christian Watson, and, Romeo Doubs is getting some love. And so is there an opportunity here for Matt LaFleur's quarterback to step up and take advantage of? He's a first round guy, and not necessarily that's meant a lot in the last, 5+ years. We've seen teams move on from first round guys pretty quickly, but I think there's a lot to like about what he can become. And so I don't disagree with you. For me, and this goes back to the Hopkins thing, I think the fact that, everybody was looking at Tennessee, and I know Heath is sort of, pushing back on this publicly, apparently, understandably so. This is a big statement for Tannehill, I think, that they went out and got Hopkins, that they're not going to rush Will Levis into action. We're still competing to be the best team in the AFC South, which is, a division that they've owned. And so I think this helps make the case for Tannehill in 2 quarterback and super flex. I moved him up since our conversation last night, from 23 to 21. Not somebody that I'm actively targeting, but I think if you miss on a good number 2 quarterback, I don't think he's that far behind Russell Wilson and Jared Goff, because we've seen him do it. Again, those guys should have a higher ceiling because of the players around them and the systems that they play in. But I think Tannehill's got certainly much more upside after what happened yesterday.
I'm just going to say this. This is for Kenny Pickett. We haven't talked about yet, really. Justin Fields was QB 18 in ADP last year, according to Fantasy Football Calculator. Trevor Lawrence was QB 19. Kenny Pickett's an afterthought right now in drafts. And both Fields and Lawrence finished as top 10 guys. Any faith in Kenny Pickett? He's got a lot going for him, situation-wise.
Hope, not faith. Hope.
Yeah. Jamie, how about you? Any Kenny Pickett interest?
Yeah, I mean, again, he's got quality players around him. He'll do some stuff with his legs. The problem for me is that this feels very much, Mike Tomlin is not going to, at least by all estimations, what we saw last year, allow him to be maybe the quarterback that he could become. Because we're going to win with defense. We're going to win with our run game. We're going to keep games close. He doesn't have a problem winning field goal games. So I think Kenny Pickett's got a lot to prove, and you look at it, think about what the Patriots turned into post Tom Brady, right? They went back to their conservative ways with a young quarterback. What have we seen from the Steelers, at least in 1 year without Ben Roethlisberger? Go back to their conservative ways. Remember what Roethlisberger was early in his career? Remember what Brady was early in his career? They had to work to become those guys. Same coach in a lot of ways. I know Roethlisberger had Cowher, but, Tomlin sort of inherited that. I think you're going to see it's going to take a lot of time, I think, for Kenny Pickett to flourish despite the weapons around him. So, you give Deontay Johnson a couple more touchdowns. I think that's obvious. You give, a couple more to Freiermuth and to, George Pickens. But I still think as long as Najee Harris is healthy, he's going to get as many touches as he can handle, and they're fine winning a field goal game.
Heath, what are the major changes in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues? So you already said Mahomes would be, for you, outside of tier 1. For Jamie, he'd be the third guy in tier 1. What else for those managers?
Well, I think if Anthony Richardson becomes the starter, like he is maybe at the top of tier 3 instead of at the bottom of it, but not in a different tier. Daniel Jones probably moves up a tier because he only throws like 12 touchdown passes a year, and so that doesn't hurt him as much in 4-point per pass touchdown leagues. I would be more excited about Kyler in 4-point per pass touchdown leagues. And that's about it.
Okay. You could certainly argue for Sam Howell. And I'm just going to tell you.
And one more guy too, Trey Lance.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about Purdy? Do you guys like Brock Purdy?
I think he's right there with Pickett and Howell and Love for me.
If you tell me he's 100% healthy, I would probably put him ahead of those guys, but we just don't know. Until we see in camp, and I know everything's been positive so far, which is great, but when is he going to start throwing in competitive situations? That's what I want to see.
In his career, Heath,
yeah,
Daniel Jones is on pace for 19 touchdowns per 17. So let's be fair. But in his last 3 years, it's probably more like 12.
Heath is the high guy on Daniel Jones. You should be impressed.
Yeah.
All right. In his last 3 years, he is on pace for 15 touchdowns per 17. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, he loves Daniel Jones. It's very funny. He likes him more than I do. All right. We will talk to you all tomorrow with our running back tiers on Fantasy Football Today. Thanks, everybody.